make it clear.
Order. I did not make the comment.
Well, it's not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Good ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very, very, very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on a revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers, she is a former National Party candidate and current talkback host on Māori radio, the ever wonderful Claudette Hauiti, and she is from the New Zealand's largest feminist blog, The Hand Mirror, commentator and blogger Julie Ferry. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, more Shearer leadership wobbles. What is going wrong for Labour? Issue 2, changes to MMP, a wasted opportunity or necessary tinkering. And Issue 3 tonight, unemployment up to 6.8%. What are the government doing about job creation? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off tonight with Issue 1. Another round of low poll numbers and senior Labour MPs slagging off David Cunliffe to Duncan Garner have combined to cause the latest Labour leadership wobbles. It has led to a debate on Radio New Zealand between Josie Pagani and Jordan Carter about the future direction of the party. Claudette, should a political party reflect the voters' wishes, or should they go to the voters and convince them that the policies they believe in are the right ones?
Oh, okay. So, that question's actually got nothing to do with your introduction and about the clapped out leadership of the Labour Party there.
Well, no, the Labour's current political leaders, advisors, believe in the former. The activist base seem to believe in the latter.
Look, what we've seen here is a complete meltdown of the Labour caucus and a lack of leadership. So whatever it is that they need to do, they're not doing it very well. So it doesn't matter what the national government is doing. Jacinda Ardern can't get within cooee of, Paula Bennett. Hekia Parata has gone along her merry way. There is absolutely no opposition across the other side. The only real opposition we're getting is from the Green Party.
So should Labour try to move back to its core principles?
Oh, absolutely.
Or should it be play the Pagani game, which is pragmatism?
Well, every party should be pragmatic, but
Yeah.
it depends on what their definition of pragmatism is according to their context. But, when a party is trying to chase some of the National Party centre-right voters, I mean, what the heck is that about? 800,000 registered non-voters, majority of those centre-left. And where are the policies, where's the discussion, where's the cordial being had with those people? That's where they should be making their ground. That's where they should be developing, maintaining their relationships, not really worrying about what the centre-right voters are doing, for goodness sake.
Labour are trying to appeal to this, the liberal, soft middle ground of national voters.
But you've got to go back to your
that would be
heartland,
like yourself. Would you ever vote Labour?
You've got to go back to your heartland. You've got to go back to your core constituency. And for Labour, it's on the left. It's not centre right, centre left. It's left. So as much as, they're moving to the right, in comes the Green Party and takes up the left ground.
Yep.
I mean,
But in the MMP environment, Greens plus Labour could beat National.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe going centre
I
is a
doubt.
good idea.
Yeah, well, it could. If all things going well, it could. But the fact that Labour has got no strategy to attract and to maintain or strengthen those voters that they've got at the moment, it's very unlikely. And in fact, if Labour don't watch out, the Green Party, and you can see it coming up now, they're going to overtake them.
Julie, political blogger Daniel McLaughlin at the Dim Post points out that while many voters like to consider themselves in the centre, their actual views on issues like taxation are considerably to the left. His hypothesis is that the National Party is really good at advocating for its core values. Should Labour be ideological or pragmatic?
I don't think it has to be an either or. I actually think that there's a core of Labour stuff that is both pragmatic and speaks to its core values, its left-wing ideas and ideals that it was based on. Take, for example, ideas around reducing crime. A lot of the policies around poverty, around housing, around education and employment that Labour could espouse would actually have an impact on reducing crime. So there's a whole lot of things that Labour could be working on, and I believe they actually are behind the scenes. that could speak to, look pragmatic, but actually do keep in line with their core values. And I just have to disagree with Claudette about Labor being in a leadership meltdown. I'm not in a political party, but I have a lot of friends who are in particular, the Labor Party.
Yep.
I see them working really hard as activists on the ground,
Yep.
that there's not actually a lot of division amongst the party membership, even people who were on different sides in the leadership debate. Take, for example, Jordan Carter
Yep.
and Michael Wood, both recently elected to the Policy Council, had different views on the leadership, working together really well.
Yeah.
So actually I see activists fundraising, signing people up, canvassing, and really importantly getting those signatures for the asset sales petition.
You're absolutely right, but we can't suggest that there wasn't a level of backlash amongst activists when Shearer came out at that great Howard meeting with a speech.
Yep.
Who would have ever thunk that you would see a Labor Party leader criticising beneficiaries? I mean, that does go against the grain for a lot of activists.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of discomfort about that, and
but that's the pragmatism coming forward?
Well, I don't know. I think we've got a little bit of water to go under the bridge there with Shearer, because I don't know where he got the idea from that was a good idea to talk about.
Lord knows.
Because
I'll take a stab in the dark, the Paganis.
Well, but it's it just seems so out of line with, particularly in an environment we're in now, where the reason most people are unemployed is because there aren't the jobs, and we'll get to that later.
Yep.
So why are we punishing them? And also that recognition that when you're on a sickness benefit, there's a range of things that could be the problem, which mean you can't work, but yeah, you probably can paint your roof.
Claudette, does ideology versus pragmatism become a bit of a background noise here if the reality is your leader can't go 30 seconds without contradicting himself? When asked if he was not connecting with voters in the wake of poor polling earlier this week, David Shearer told journalists, "I do not believe I am not connecting." Has Labor picked the right leader?
Well, I do not believe that I'm not connecting.
I'm not sure what he meant by that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, I don't know. But, absolutely, I mean, this just goes to prove that there is a leadership meltdown. They have, and when you have, the ABC club, trying to send off, Cunliffe overseas so that he doesn't get in the way, I mean, it might all be very well that the grassroots community are organising themselves and they're mobilising, which is well and true and fine, but behind who? And behind what? And behind what strategy? And behind what vision? And what's the driving force? What's the mobilisation? Who's rallying them together? I mean, where is that? Where's that one united vision and drive and that aspirational goal?
To be
behind
fair,
somebody who's not quite
National. It kind of parallels a little bit so far. Shearer's leadership so far, a little bit like Bill English's when he was leader of the opposition with National, and he just didn't seem to glue or gel everything in a direction, did he?
Well, it is about, if you're going to break it down, it is about a personality, and it is about somebody who has the charismatic wherewithal to mobilise and to strengthen fragmented, wide-reaching, broad church. I mean, let's face it doesn't matter which party you're in, you have broad churches and you have a range of different ideas, and that's the way all parties run. But you do have to have a strong leader that can mobilise and interconnect and interweave all those disparate thoughts and feelings into one.
Julie, it's part of the problem here that David, bless him, I mean, we all know him, he's a great chap, an amazing backstory, very, very affable. Do you think the problem is he just doesn't have the institutionalised knowledge of the Labor Party? I mean, Helen Clark knew, breathed, lived Labor. Jordan knows, lived, breathed. We can name a whole bunch of Labor Party people who have moved through, who understand the party and understand the history. When you see David Shearer explaining policy, it almost like he's got one foot at the door because he's not quite sure whether he should be there, and maybe doesn't understand that he could bolt. Do you think the issue is that he just doesn't have the history, and will he gain that by 2014?
I think one of the points I wanted to pick up on was the idea that this is somehow an unusual thing to be happening at this point in the cycle. Labor have lost 2 elections in a row now. Shearer's been in the leadership a pretty short period of time.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the key reasons that people in Labor did ultimately support Shearer over Cunliffe was because they saw in him someone who still had some growth to go through as a political person, as a leader. Whereas Cunliffe, it was kind of like, where he's at now, that's probably what he'll be like, whereas Shearer was seen as having some capacity and potential for further the growth.
Yep.
And, we're just going to have to wait and see that. I think it's worth noting that Helen Clark has said this is similar to a lot of the situations she faced in
Yep.
93 to 96.
Yep.
She would have won the 96 election. She would have been Prime Minister if Winston Peters had made a different decision.
That's right.
So I definitely don't think we can rule out, definitely don't think, but I definitely think Labor are not out of the game for 2014.
Yep.
But the other thing is we forget that Key came from outside the National
That's
Party.
true.
He hadn't been an MP very long. And we are seeing a generational change in both, I think, of our major political parties. National probably slightly ahead of Labor in terms of going through it, and Shearer is part of that change. So, as long as he has people around him who have that institutional knowledge, it doesn't have to be a fatal flaw.
It is interesting about the generational knowledge because, of course, Shearer's older than Key.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but newer to Parliament, so,
final
That's
question to
absolutely
both
true.
of
You
you.
can be brand new, but if
Yep.
your strategists and advisors have skin on the ground, then you can weather through this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, quick final question to both of you on
That's
this.
of course if you've got the good strategists and
well, right.
advisors.
Well, here we go. Does Labor need a new leader or do they need new strategists?
They need new strategists.
Yep.
At this point in time, you can pick a number of potential leaders in that front bench. Absolutely, you can. But at this point in time, for Labor to bed down, and they need to bed down and get stuck in, they do need to have a good strategy and a driving vision behind achieving their goals. And I think that, really, if they've got those really tough, pragmatic strategists who are real mongrels and real hustlers who know the political environment, then it doesn't really matter whether it is Shearer or whether it's Jacinda or whether it's Robertson, they'll be able to get that person over the line.
So they should be calling Matt McCartan, should they? Do they need a new leader or they need new strategists?
I think changing the leader would be a big mistake.
Yep.
And I think that what they are doing at the moment in terms of internal processes around an organisational review and also the review of their policy platform, which Jordan's involved in leading, I think those things are going to flow through to new strategies. At this point in the cycle, they're not really as outward facing as probably a lot of us would like because they've got to sort out their internal stuff first. And I actually don't think there's as much internal conflict as people are saying, but they are in a state of growth where there is a bit of uncertainty.
Yeah, that's right, a state of growth, although it does appear as though there is internal wrangling when you get an MP, a maverick MP that comes out against the marriage equality bill. So immediately that's going to get, big exposure across the media and, headlines.
That was a pretty dumb
caucuses
move,
in a disarray.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2, the MEP recommendations are back with many bloggers and pundits deriding it as a wasted opportunity. A 4% threshold and removing the coattailing feature of winning an electorate seems more akin to tinkering than making the system more democratic. Julie, with the lowest voter turnout in 120 years, shouldn't the recommendations have been focused on making every voter feel that their vote counts, rather than removing coattailing and a mere 1% drop of the threshold?
I think the issue of turnout wasn't really about the electoral system.
No.
I think it was primarily about people not feeling a strong motivation to vote for Labor, but also not really wanting to vote for National, and so a lot of people stayed home. So, but in terms of the 2 changes that have been suggested, at this stage they're only draft. So there will be some discussion. I'll be really interested to see if National do pick any of them up.
Yes.
But the personally, I would have liked to have seen the threshold go down to the size of one seat. I think that would be fairer and more proportional. But I am happy that they've gone down a little bit, and also that they're getting rid of the coattail stuff, because I think that was the biggest single issue identified in the submissions as seen as unfair.
Claudette, the right have manipulated the coattailing feature of MMP more than the left, but it does allow small parties the ability to build a movement. Ending this feature would simply lock the big 2 parties back into power, wouldn't it?
You might want to call it manipulation, but the biggest manipulator of MMP, of course, was Auntie Helen. She was the biggest player of this, and she did it, magnificently well. And this national government has just learnt off that.
Yeah.
So, and I know that this national government is going to abide by whatever decision comes around. So, for me, what I cringe about is that it's not about the minority party getting in the, but it is about the coattailing and getting in some real maverick, weirdo, greenie, tree-hugging MPs that talk about,
You mean Richard Prosser,
So,
don't
yeah,
you?
are you talking about the New Zealand
somebody
First list?
somebody a little bit closer to home than that. You know, when they can totally ignore the economic plight of Ngāpuhi in Northland and slam the government for trying to build better roads so that there can be economic growth up north. You know, and when they're trying to build the prosperity of the fishing industry up north, and we're worrying about that blinking road. You know,
I don't know if that necessarily answers my question, but do you think locking off the coattailing, do you think it just makes it easier for Labour and National to keep it their own little cosy club? I mean, one of the elements of a coattailing is it does allow small parties an opportunity to have a voice. Are we limiting our democracy if we lose the coattailing?
It could do.
Julie, why should the, well, there we go, there was the answer. Why should the threshold be 4% and not 3%? I mean, the MMP review notes that 4% would still remain a significant barrier to new parties entering Parliament. We voted for MMP because it gave more representation. Is the fear of splinter groups running Parliament too much of a, does it have too much hold in the public imagination?
I think it does. And I particularly think that, you know, we have seen some poor quality MPs who have come in on coattails.
We've seen some poor quality MPs elected to the House as well.
Yeah, and safe electorate seats. So that issue,
But they
for
were
me,
elected as opposed to coming in off a coattail.
but they've come in situations where, you know, they knew they were pretty safe.
Yeah,
You know, particularly if you think back to first past the post, you know, you've got people there who were just going to be completely, it was just not going to be possible to unseat them. And so efforts just didn't go in from other parties.
Yeah, so there's pros and cons for all the systems because there is no guarantee on the quality of the calibre.
No, that's true, and that's up to party organisations, I think. And that's where, you know, personally, I actually think that the Green MPs, many of the ones they've brought in have been of a very high calibre. My issue comes when there's not media scrutiny before an election of the people down the list who are potentially going to get in. And in fact, we saw that with New Zealand First this time, where it was only about a week out that we started to get some scrutiny going on some of those MPs that they've brought in. Some of whom have actually turned out to be quite good. I had a lot of time for Tracy Martin, for example. Now, but, you know, we have seen in the past other people who've come in who, you know, you mentioned someone you consider a Maverick MP before. Now, they're elected in a safe Labour seat. So I don't think it's necessarily about list MPs versus elected MPs. We need high quality MPs across the board.
Claudette, David Farrar blogs that the 4% threshold will help National by empowering the Conservative Party while killing off the coattailing will stop Mana. He says National should adopt the changes as it will help them win future elections. What way do you think National will go?
Well, you know, as much as I would like to tell, you know, the national government what to do, I think that they're going to play the long game in this and they're going to see how it beds down. I think strategically they're in a position to be able to weather anything. However, having said that, though, you know, they are quite dependent upon Peter Dunn and you know, the United Party and you know, ACT actually as well too. So there is a fear that the conservative right parties for this government will disappear, and so it might be that you know, that they're thinking very, very strongly about, you know, what position they're going to be left with.
Would National be happier to deal with Peter Dunn and John Banks, or would they be happy to deal with the Conservative Party, the Christians in that, the Christian morality in that? Better the devil you know?
Well, I'm not sure whether it's better the devil you know, but I mean, you know, obviously, you know, I talk about skin on the ground, and ACT and United Future have skin on the ground. I mean, Peter Dunn is you know, an institution.
Colin's trying to buy himself some skin.
Well, yeah. But, you know, I mean, he's got a long reputation, and actually he's a man of integrity as well, too, that he can work with any party, you know, including the Labour Party, because he's been a member of the Labour Party.
Well, that does require a certain amount of integrity.
But you know, I think in terms of the Conservative Party versus the ACT Party, there's a lot of work that Conservative Party needs to do. I mean, if they want to be considered to be anything worth voting for, there's a whole lot of work that bloke needs to do.
Final question to both of you. What's your prediction for the final changes?
I think that the National will probably pick up the changes, but they might look to tweak the coat hanging, particularly because Banks has you know, kicked up about that.
Sure.
I agree.
You go, no? Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3, unemployment jumped to 6.8% last week. You wouldn't know it from the mainstream media, who didn't actually cover it. Claudette, last time you were on the show with Sal and Manning, you claimed the left were overblowing unemployment. At 6.8%, is unemployment still a lefty myth?
No, I didn't say no. I think you should have a look at the tape and see exactly what it was that I was disagreeing with you about. I mean, unemployment is very real. I mean,
Yep.
I live in Māngere
Yep.
and it's a very real situation.
Yep.
However, having said that, I also see the amount of job vacancies that are available in South Auckland. It's not just about employment as well too, though. It's about accessibility to these jobs in terms of transport. It's about childcare. It's about education. It's about poverty, food. It's more than just about employment that we've got to look at as well too in respect to this particular issue.
Do you think it also comes down to the minimum wage? I mean, people are out there working their asses off and they're being paid a pittance. A lot of them are being paid a pittance.
You know, that's a really good discussion that we have in South Auckland. The majority of our whānau in South Auckland are not coping, not because of the cost of living, but because of the debt.
Right.
The debt is the most crippling for all our families, particularly the ones in South Auckland. And these debts have been accumulated and accrued during Labour Party's time, during the Labour government's time.
Everyone went on a debt spurge.
Well, they did actually, and it was, buying those cars and buying those big screen televisions,
Loan sharks.
where it was, no deposit, 18 months free interest period, and then the 18 months have come up, and now we've got families who are paying up to 40% interest, on goods that they really shouldn't have been able to purchase.
It's a shame then that the National Party didn't support Carol Bowman.
I know. I was just about to say how outrageous that was. Julie, where are the 4,000 jobs John Key promised would be created by the bike cycle track? They would have helped this limit this
they're on a
cost.
cycleway to nowhere, I think,
gone?
is where those jobs are.
Where are the jobs?
The Jobs Summit was supposed to be this
That's right.
great initiative. The cycleway was one of the things that came out of that, but we've really seen next to nothing out of that. And the government constantly talk about it being Canterbury. Well, if you actually look, Canterbury's unemployment rate is actually slightly lower than 6.8%. So it's not all about Christchurch, it's not all about the earthquake. And I think we have a real problem in that we have high levels of unemployment amongst Māori and Pacifica. Also Asian unemployment is higher than Pākehā. And we also have this group of what are called the NEETs, the not in employment educational training, in the 15 to 24 age group, 13.1% in this same quarter. And that's a real worry about what are we doing about creating jobs. And I agree with Claudette about a lot of the scaffolding that has to go around supporting employment, about things about poverty and housing and transport. I agree with you about that and the stuff about debt. But ultimately we need the jobs.
Final question to both of you on this. Where do you think the unemployment rate's going to peak? Will we see it go cross 7% by this year?
I have a feeling that we might come up around 7.
Yep.
Yeah, I do. I think that it's trending that way.
With the Australian economy also faltering in China, we have created a bit of a microclimate here that has, as National always
and
say.
it's about the coattailing as well too. We come in slightly behind those trends as well too. So what we're seeing now is the trend that's happening globally as well too, and we're always slightly behind that.
Where's it going to peak?
Well, that's interesting because we're actually about halfway down the OECD. We're just below the average for the OECD, but you've got some real outliers in the 20+% range. So, and we're also significantly higher than Australia. Australia's sitting at 5.1%. So I think there have been some decisions that have been made that have not addressed employment problems that we have, that have perhaps exacerbated them as well. We're looking at a lot of state sector jobs that have been cut, for example. a lot of those people are actually going to Australia to work
Yeah.
now. That's where the skills are
And
being
forcing
used.
beneficiaries on out of the benefit into a job market that isn't actually providing jobs.
Well, that's
gonna
right.
hurt,
And it's about matching people's skills to the jobs that are available. And that
Yeah.
requires some measure of workforce planning and
Yeah.
labour market planning.
Yeah.
And that's something that this government's just not interested in
There's
doing.
only so
I think
many
it could go
burgers.
up.
There's only so many burgers you can flip and coffees you can serve, right?
Well,
If
that's
you're not
right.
creating new jobs,
Yeah.
the service industry isn't going to be able to carry it. Okay, let's wrap the show with last word. Claudette, your final word this week is.
Yes, yes, thanks very much for that. I did want to talk about South Auckland, and we've got really great community groups helping the community in a range of areas. Well, what I have observed is that a lot of these community groups are actually in the business of poverty, and a lot of them do not work to become extinct, do not work to get their people onto other schemes, into employment and into educational facilities, back into schools. So I've observed about 3 organisations who have had families on their books for about 3 years, teenage girls going in at 16, coming out at 21 with their 3rd child. And there are some groups that are in the business to keep their clients dependent. And I think that is one of the biggest downfalls of South Auckland, is the interdependency and the industry of interdependency that has escalated in that area.
Julie, your final word?
My final word is an acronym. SMEANZ, Straits for Marriage Equality in Aotearoa, New Zealand. You can find it on Facebook, just
Excellent.
put SMEANZ in.
Yep.
So basically it's about showing the support that exists amongst many in the heterosexual community, people who could already marry if they wanted to, for marriage equality, that it's not just something that affects those people, as John Key said. It's something that's got much broader support because it's about fairness and justice.
I turned up at a kiss on
And
for
a
that.
one law for all.
And
We're all really
Yeah.
happy to talk about.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Claudette. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word, fresh from the Human Rights Commission telling Paula Bennett that she has breached the privacy of a beneficiary who complained about the minister ending training allowances that Bennett herself had used to climb the social ladder. Bennett now has the audacity to threaten every beneficiary in the country by telling the media that she would do it again. Bennett holds the private information of hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders, and she's brazenly boasting to the media in her arrogance that she'd do it again. I appreciate that the darkened nature of our angels love bashing the dirty, filthy Benny, that it's on par with other treasured cultural hobbies like alcoholism, rugby and domestic violence, but surely allowing a minister to bully and threaten the weakest members of our society should cause some of our rednecked New Zealanders cause to pause. Bennett is out of control. It needs to be reined in. Just because these people are beneficiaries does not mean they should have their privacy abused by a minister on a pathetic power trip. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded new citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on